The war chamber that carried Dominion had witnessed the fall of entire civilizations. Walls of black alloy curved around the circular hall, illuminated by a floating holographic map of the surrounding star systems. Hundreds of small glowing icons represented fleets currently engaged in conquest, patrol, or occupation. It was a living map of power, one that constantly reminded every officer present that the Dominion ruled this region of the galaxy without challenge. At the center of the chamber stood General Vorik, Supreme Commander of the Dominion's frontier forces. He was reviewing reports from 3 separate campaigns when the silence of the room suddenly fractured. A young communications officer stiffened at his console. His eyes widened. Then his voice came out quiet and uncertain. General, Vorik didn't even look up at first. Yes. The officer hesitated. Long-range sensors are detecting new arrivals in the Tauran system. Vorik exhaled slowly. Another patrol fleet. Perhaps, maybe smugglers. Pirates sometimes slip through Dominion territory before being destroyed. Identify them. The officer leaned closer to his display, fingers moving rapidly across glowing controls. The holographic star map flickered. A cluster of small lights appeared near the outer edge of the Tauran system. Vorik glanced up briefly. How many ships? The officer's voice faltered. Unknown. That answer finally pulled Vorik's attention away from the campaign reports. Unknown. The officer swallowed. They are emerging from hyperspace faster than we can classify them. Another officer stepped closer to assist, studying the incoming data. More lights appeared on the map. 10 ships, then 20, then 50. The quiet murmuring of the war chamber slowly faded. Every officer's attention shifted toward the holographic display. Because the ships were not arriving randomly, they were appearing in perfect formation. Vorik's voice became sharper. Identify the fleet. The communications officer stared at his console as translation algorithms processed the ship's signatures. Then the answer appeared. His face drained of color. General? He hesitated again. Speak. It's the humans. For a moment, no one said anything. Humans were known to the Dominion, but only barely. A young species, recently spacefaring, technologically capable but politically fragmented. Dominion intelligence categorized them as minor regional actors. They possessed a small defensive navy. 12 ships, according to the latest intelligence briefings. 12. Vorik looked back at the holographic map. There were already over 80 lights now, and more were appearing. That is impossible, one of the fleet commanders muttered. Another officer zoomed in on the map. More ships dropped from hyperspace in coordinated bursts. 100, then 120. The communications officer whispered again. General? Vorik folded his arms. Yes, they're still arriving. The chamber fell silent. A strategic officer stepped forward and examined the formation carefully. They're not scattering, she said quietly. They're organizing. Vorik studied the map. She was correct. The ships were dividing into clean geometric patterns. Defensive screens, carrier groups, heavy strike formations. The arrangement was unmistakable. This was not a patrol. This was a battle fleet. Another notification appeared on the console. The communications officer inhaled sharply. We are receiving a transmission. Vorik narrowed his eyes. Source: human flagship. The entire chamber watched as the signal stabilized. The central holographic display shifted. Instead of star maps and fleet icons, a human face appeared. The officer speaking wore a dark naval uniform. Gray hair, calm expression, but his eyes were cold and steady. This is Admiral Marcus Hale of the United Terran Fleet. His voice carried through the chamber with surprising clarity. We are requesting communication with Dominion Command. Vorik stepped forward. You are speaking to General Vorik. The human admiral nodded once. Good. Vorik gestured toward the growing fleet outside the system. You have entered Dominion territory without authorization. The human's expression didn't change. Yes. More lights appeared on the holographic map behind him. 200 ships now, then 250. Vorik leaned forward slightly. Explain your presence. Admiral Hale remained silent for a moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice had grown colder. 3 weeks ago, a Dominion patrol destroyed a mining installation designated Outpost K-17. Vorik glanced at his officers. A logistics commander checked records quickly. Yes, she said quietly. A small civilian operation near the border. The admiral continued. There were 23 human civilians stationed there. Another pause. Vorik shrugged slightly. Territorial incidents occur. More ships appeared on the map. 300, 400. The human fleet continued arriving like a gathering storm. Admiral Hale spoke again. You're right. His voice remained calm. Incidents do occur. Vorik studied him carefully. Then why bring a fleet? The human admiral looked directly into the camera. You see, General? He gestured behind him as the star map expanded again. 500 ships now. Humans tend to react strongly when someone kills our people. The war chamber suddenly felt colder. Another officer leaned toward the general and whispered quietly. General? Vorik didn't look away from a human admiral. What? The officer swallowed. They're still arriving. And on the holographic map, the human fleet kept growing. The war chamber of the Carrot Dominion had seen many impossible things. Entire star systems conquered in days. Ancient alien relics unearthed from dead worlds. Weapons capable of splitting moons. But nothing like the fleet currently assembling in the Tauran system. The holographic map now glowed with hundreds of human ship markers. And they were still arriving. Each new hyperspace flash added more vessels to the formation. 600 ships. 700. 800. The communications officer stared at the growing numbers in disbelief. General, our long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace corridors opening simultaneously. General Vorik unfolded his arms behind his back. His gaze locked on the star map. How many corridors? The officer swallowed. At least 12. Murmurs spread across the chamber. 12 hyperspace corridors meant 12 separate fleets entering the system at once. No minor civilization should have that capability. A strategic officer stepped forward, zooming the display outward. New ships appeared from the outer edges of the system, sliding smoothly into position with disciplined precision. They're not disorganized, she said quietly. They're coordinating. Vorik watched as the ships formed layered rings around the Tauran star. Heavy vessels in the center, carriers positioned behind defensive screens, fast attack groups forming outer patrol lines. It was a kind of formation used by advanced war fleets, species that had fought interstellar wars for centuries. But humanity had only reached the stars a few generations ago. Another officer raised a new data report. General, we are scanning the ship's signatures now. Vorik gestured. Report. The officer's expression became increasingly confused. Several of these vessels do not match any known Terran design. Explain. They appear to be newer. Another pause. Much newer. The chamber filled with quiet tension. Dominion intelligence records listed 12 confirmed Terran warships. 12. Yet the hologram now showed over 800 vessels. And the number continued climbing. The communications console chimed again. Another incoming message. Vorik glanced toward the officer. What now? They're transmitting something. The officer opened the file. Lines of human text filled the main display. At first it looked like a legal document. Then the translation algorithms finished processing the file. A title appeared at the top. United Terran Civilian Protection Doctrine. The officers leaned closer. Below the title was a structured list. Cold. Precise. Organized. Every line described a different response to civilian casualties inflicted by foreign powers. Level 1, diplomatic inquiry. Level 2, economic retaliation. Level 3, trade blockade. Level 4, fleet deployment. Level 5, strategic military intervention. The war chamber went silent. Vorik turned slowly toward the communications officer. How many civilians were killed at the mining station? The officer checked the earlier report. 23. Another officer quickly scanned the document. Then he froze. General? Vorik looked at him. Yes. The officer pointed at a specific section of the human doctrine. Level 4. The general stepped closer to read it. Level 4 response trigger. Civilian casualties exceeding 20 individuals. Underneath the line was a single phrase. Fleet deployment authorized. Vorik looked back toward the holographic star map. The human fleet count had now reached 1,000 ships. He felt something unfamiliar stir in his mind. Not fear, but uncertainty. The communication screen flickered again. Admiral Marcus Hale reappeared. Behind him, the massive human fleet stretched across the system like a steel storm. General Vorik. Hale said calmly. Vorik straightened his posture. You have assembled an impressive force. The human nodded slightly. Thank you. Is this meant to intimidate us? The Admiral shook his head. No. Vorik narrowed his eyes. Then what is your purpose here? Hale gestured slightly toward the document displayed in the war chamber. You've already read it. Vorik glanced at the doctrine again. Fleet deployment. Yes. Another hyperspace flash lit the map. More ships appeared. 1,050. 1,100. The general felt the war chamber grow quieter with every new arrival. Finally, he spoke again. How many ships does humanity possess? Admiral Hale paused, then gave an answer that made the chamber colder. Enough. The human leaned forward slightly. We didn't come here for war, General. Vorik raised an eyebrow. No. Hale's eyes hardened. We came here for accountability. The war chamber erupted with quiet whispers. Dominion law did not punish officers for destroying minor species outposts. It was considered routine enforcement. Vorik looked directly at the human admiral. You cross into Dominion territory with 1,000 warships. Yes. You threaten military action. No. Vorik blinked. The admiral remained calm. We are offering you a choice. Another pause filled the chamber. What choice? Vorik asked. Hale answered without hesitation. Identify the commander responsible for the destruction of Outpost K-17. The chamber stiffened. And then, Vorik asked carefully. Admiral Hale's voice became colder. Then we see what kind of species you are. Outside the Tauran system, the largest human fleet ever recorded continued to grow. For the first time in the history of the Kareth Dominion, an enemy fleet surrounded one of their systems and did nothing. The holographic map inside the Dominion war chamber showed the Tauran system wrapped in rings of human ships. More than 1,200 vessels now held position across the outer edges of the star system. Heavy dreadnoughts anchored the center. Carrier groups sat behind defensive screens. Fast attack squadrons patrolled the perimeter like silent predators. Yet no weapons fired, no missiles launched, no electronic warfare signals. Just quiet, disciplined stillness. General Vorik Teln studied the display carefully. Status report, he ordered. A tactical officer stepped forward. Dominion defense fleets are mobilizing from neighboring sectors. Reinforcements will arrive within 8 hours. Human fleet activity? Minimal. Vorik turned. Explain. They are holding formation. Another officer added quietly. Weapon systems are powered but inactive. The general narrowed his eyes. They came here with 1,000 warships, and they are waiting? Yes, General. The silence in the war chamber became heavy. Dominion doctrine was simple. If you assembled a fleet this large, you attacked immediately. Surprise was everything. Delay meant giving the enemy time to prepare. But the humans seemed unconcerned about that. Hours passed. Dominion reinforcements arrived. More warships filled the Tauran system. Orbital defense cannons around the central planet powered online. Fighter wings launched from carrier bays. The Dominion was preparing for a massive battle. Yet the humans continued to wait. Finally, Vorik signaled the communications officer. Open the channel. Moments later, Admiral Marcus Hale appeared on the main screen again. The human admiral looked exactly as he had before. Calm, unbothered. Vorik spoke first. You have surrounded our system. Yes. You possess overwhelming numbers. Yes. And yet you have not attacked. The human nodded slightly. That's correct. Vorik leaned forward. Why? Hale folded his hands calmly. Because humans prefer not to fight wars we don't need. The chamber stirred with quiet irritation. Vorik's voice hardened. You brought over 1,000 warships into Dominion territory. Yes. And you expect us to believe you do not want war? The Admiral tilted his head slightly. No. Then explain your strategy. Hale gestured toward the fleet visible behind him through the command bridge viewport. We came here to ask a question. Vorik frowned. A question? Yes. The human's voice became slightly quieter. What kind of civilization are you? The war chamber grew still. That question makes no sense, Vorik said coldly. Hale nodded. It does to humans. He continued. You destroyed a civilian mining station. It was inside Dominion territory. And there were 23 human civilians there. Vorik spread his hands slightly. That is unfortunate. The human admiral watched him carefully. Then he spoke again. You see, General, this moment right here is important. Vorik frowned. Explain. Hale leaned closer to the camera. Right now you have two options. The holographic star map behind Vorik continued showing the massive fleets facing each other across the system. Option 1. Hale continued. You identify the officer responsible for destroying Outpost K-17. Murmurs spread across the chamber. Arresting a Dominion commander for attacking a minor species installation would be unheard of. Vorik crossed his arms. And option 2? Hale didn't hesitate. You refuse. Vorik's eyes narrowed. And what happens then? The human paused for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its calm warmth. Then we learned something important about you. The tension in the chamber thickened. Vorik stared at the human admiral. You're threatening war. No. The answer came instantly. I'm giving you a chance to avoid one. Vorik leaned back slowly. The Dominion does not punish its officers for enforcing territorial law. The human nodded slowly. Yes. Vorik felt something change in the human's expression. Not anger. Not fear. Something colder. Then, Hale said quietly, You've chosen option 2. The war chamber lights dimmed slightly as new alerts filled the tactical displays. A Dominion sensor officer suddenly stiffened. General, Vorik turned sharply. What is it? All human ships are shifting formation. The holographic map exploded with motion. The outer rings of human vessels repositioned with incredible precision. Strike groups moved forward. Carrier screens tightened. Dreadnoughts aligned along firing vectors. Hundreds of weapon systems powered simultaneously. Another officer spoke in alarm. Energy spikes across the entire fleet. Vorik looked back toward the human admiral. You said you didn't want war. Hale met his gaze calmly. We don't. Outside the Tauran system, 1,200 human warships finished aligning their weapons. But we are very prepared for one. The Tauran system had not seen a battle in over a century. But within seconds, that changed. Inside the Dominion war chamber, alarms exploded across every console. Red warning lights flooded the room. Energy spike detected across the entire human fleet. Multiple weapon systems locking targets. Dominion ships reporting targeting signals. General Vorik Teln stood frozen before the massive holographic map as the human fleet finished its formation. Over 1,200 ships now aligned in perfect firing patterns. The silence lasted only a moment. Then the first human weapon fired. A narrow beam of white energy lanced across space. It struck the engines of a Dominion cruiser orbiting Tauran's outer defense ring. The cruiser's propulsion system exploded instantly. The ship spun helplessly, drifting out of formation. Another beam fired. Then another. Then hundreds. But something strange happened. The Dominion ships weren't being destroyed. They were being surgically disabled. Weapon mounts exploded. Shield emitters collapsed. Sensor arrays shattered. One by one, Dominion vessels lost propulsion, power, or targeting systems. Within seconds, the Tauran system turned into a chaotic field of drifting warships. Inside the war chamber, officers shouted in disbelief. They're hitting engines. They're targeting shield relays. Command ships are losing sensor systems. Vorik stared at the tactical display. The humans weren't firing randomly. They were striking precise structural points across hundreds of Dominion ships simultaneously. It was impossible. No fleet could coordinate that level of precision. Yet the human fleet moved like a single organism, perfectly synchronized. Another Dominion battlecruiser fired its plasma cannons toward the human lines. Before the weapon could fully charge, a human strike beam sliced through its targeting system. The cannons died instantly. "General," a tactical officer shouted, "our fleets cannot lock weapons." "How?" Vorik demanded. "Human electronic warfare." Another officer shouted seconds later, "They're inside our command networks." Vorik's eyes widened. Inside? That meant the humans had penetrated Dominion military encryption, a feat Dominion intelligence believed impossible. Outside the viewport of Tauren's orbital command station, human dreadnoughts glided forward like dark metal mountains. Their weapons fired again. Another Dominion carrier lost its engines. Fighter squadrons launched desperately into space. Human defense drones intercepted them within seconds. Small bursts of light filled the void as fighters lost propulsion and drifted harmlessly away. No explosions, no massive destruction, just precise, terrifying control. Within 10 minutes, half the Dominion fleet was powerless. Within 15, nearly every major warship had been disabled. Inside the war chamber, the shouting slowly faded, because a tactical map showed something unbelievable. The human fleet had neutralized the entire Dominion defense force. Without destroying it, hundreds of Dominion ships now floated silently in space. Weapons offline, engines dead, command systems locked. General Vorik stared at the display. "How?" The communications officer interrupted quietly. "Incoming transmission from the human admiral." Vorik nodded slowly. "Open it." Admiral Marcus Hale appeared on the main display once again. Behind him, the human fleet drifted calmly through disabled Dominion formations. The Admiral's voice was calm, controlled. "We warned you we didn't want a war." Vorik's voice came out rough. "You just defeated my fleet." Hale shook his head. "No." The human gestured behind him. "We demonstrated something." Vorik looked back toward the holographic map. Thousands of Dominion crew members were now trapped inside powerless ships. Entire squadrons immobilized in space. Yet none of them had been destroyed. "What did you demonstrate?" Vorik asked quietly. Hale leaned forward slightly. That human studied war very carefully. The war chamber remained silent, because every officer understood what that meant. If the humans had wanted destruction, Tauren would already be gone. Instead, they had proven something far more terrifying. They could defeat an entire fleet without even trying to destroy it. Vorik looked back at the human admiral. "What happens now?" The human paused for a moment. Then he answered calmly. "Now we finished the conversation we started." The Tauren system was silent. Hundreds of Dominion warships drifted helplessly through space, their engines dead and their weapons offline. What had once been a powerful defensive fleet was now nothing more than a field of floating metal. Yet none of them had been destroyed. Inside the Dominion war chamber, the officers stood in stunned silence. The tactical hologram told the entire story. Every Dominion vessel had been disabled with terrifying precision, and surrounding them, the human fleet waited. Over 1,200 ships, perfectly arranged across the system, like silent sentinels. General Vorik Teln stared at the display. For the first time in decades of command, he had no immediate answer. The communications console chimed softly. "Transmission incoming." The officer said quietly, "Human flagship." Vorik nodded slowly. "Open the channel." The holographic screen shifted, revealing Admiral Marcus Hale once more. Behind him, the command bridge of the Terran flagship glowed with dim blue light. Officers moved calmly at their stations, as if the destruction of an entire Dominion fleet had been nothing more than routine. Hale's voice came through clearly. "General Vorik." Vorik folded his arms. "You have proven your point." The human tilted his head slightly. "Have we?" Vorik gestured toward the tactical map. "You neutralized my fleet." Hale nodded once. "Yes." "You could destroy every ship here." Another nod. "Yes." Vorik leaned forward. So, why haven't you? The human admiral was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again. Because we didn't come here for revenge. The war chamber stirred quietly. Vorik frowned. Then why bring a fleet of this size? Hale stepped closer to the camera. To teach a lesson. Vorik's eyes narrowed. What lesson? The human answered calmly. That human lives matter. The room fell silent again. Hale continued. 23 civilians died at Outpost K-17. Vorik's voice hardened. They were inside Dominion territory. Yes. They should not have been there. Hale nodded slightly. Perhaps. The Admiral's eyes grew colder. But that doesn't make their lives worthless. The Dominion officers shifted uncomfortably. Because, in Dominion law, minor species were exactly that. Minor. Expendable. Hale continued. You destroyed their station without warning. They violated territorial boundaries. And you didn't care who died. Vorik remained silent. The human's voice grew sharper. That's the difference between us, General. He gestured toward the helpless Dominion fleet floating outside. We could destroy every ship you have. Vorik knew that was not an exaggeration. The battle had proven it. Hale continued. But humans believe in consequences. Another pause filled the chamber. Then the Admiral spoke again. You have one final decision to make. Vorik slowly straightened. What decision? Hale's voice returned to its calm tone. Identify the officer responsible for the destruction of Outpost K-17. The chamber grew tense. Dominion commanders never arrested their own for actions taken during enforcement operations. It would be seen as weakness. Vorik looked around the room. His officers watched him carefully. Then he looked back toward the human admiral. And if we refuse? Hale answered immediately. Then the next conversation will not be so polite. The words hung in the air. Vorik looked back toward the holographic map. The human fleet filled the towering system. Every weapon still aimed. Every ship still ready. But none firing. Waiting. For a decision. Several minutes passed. Finally, Vorik turned toward the communications officer. Locate the patrol commander who destroyed Outpost K-17. The officer hesitated. General, that would be Commander Ralvek. Vorik nodded. Transmit an arrest order immediately. Gasps spread across the war chamber. But no one argued. Within minutes, the report came back. Commander Ralvek has been detained. Vorik turned back to the human admiral. It is done. Admiral Hale watched him carefully. Then he nodded slowly. Good. Behind him, the massive human fleet began powering down their weapons. Vorik exhaled slowly. This changes nothing about Dominion authority. Hale smiled faintly. You're right. The Admiral gestured toward the drifting fleets outside. But it changes something much more important. Vorik frowned. What? Hale answered quietly. Now the galaxy knows something. What? The human admiral leaned closer to the camera. When someone harms humans, we show up. The transmission ended. Hours later, the Terran fleet departed the Tauran system. 1,200 warships vanished back into hyperspace. But the story spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet. A single message passed quietly between civilizations. When a nervous officer ever reported the words, General, the humans have arrived. The response was always the same. Then make sure they're not angry.